I said the words to his back. That is the thing I remember most clearly. Not his face, not the quality of the light, not even the particular smell of that market, though I have carried all of those things with me across every year since. What I remember first, what surfaces before anything else when I close my eyes and go back to Durrith Station on that afternoon, is that I said the words to his back. He was already walking away. I had perhaps 3 steps before he would pass the edge of the stall's awning and be gone, absorbed into the dust and the crowd and the blue shimmer of the heat rising off the docking aprons. I said, "Save me. Take me with you." I said it in standard, which most traders on that frontier spoke, and which he, being human, almost certainly spoke as well. I said it quietly, because I had not raised my voice in more than 8 months, and I was not sure the mechanism still worked. And I said it without knowing a single thing about him, except that he was the only being in that market who had looked at me. Not at my file, at the inventory tag clipped to the stall rail, not at the scar tissue on my left forearm, but at me, at my face. For the half-second it takes to register that a person is looking back at you. He stopped. I would like to tell you that I had calculated something, that I had weighed the risk, assessed his bearing, noted the calluses on his hands, and the particular way a man who knows what hard work is carries himself through a crowd. Perhaps some part of me did. Survival does its arithmetic below the level of thought, and I had been surviving for 2 years and 4 months by the time I spoke to him. The honest answer is that I said it because the market was closing in an hour, and the trader who held my transit papers was already in negotiation with a livestock broker from the outer settlements, and I was going to end up on a dray hauler heading for the dry planet interior if someone did not change the shape of the next 30 minutes. And he was the only human in the market. That was the whole of my reasoning. He was the only human at the market. Humans, I had learned, were the most useful category of being when you needed a law invoked, because humans had written most of the laws, and they knew where the exceptions lived. He turned around. I will try to describe him accurately, because he deserves that. He was not young. There was gray at the temples of his dark hair, and a weariness in the set of his shoulders that was not weakness, but rather the particular posture of a man who has been doing a physically demanding job for longer than he had expected to still be doing. His face was weathered, sun-scored and line-cut, with a jaw that carried a short beard going gray at the chin. His eyes, when they found mine, were the color of old copper, and they were steady. Not wary, not the particular calculating steadiness of a man pricing something. Just the level attention of a person who has been addressed and is deciding whether to listen. He was wearing a freight coordinator's vest, cleaned with the nested pockets on the left breast for transit chips and manifest carbons, and the vest was dusty, and the name tab on the right shoulder had been restitched at some point, and now read, Imgalt. He carried no weapon that I could see. He was holding a grease-marked survey tablet in his left hand, and when he stopped walking, he shifted the tablet under his arm, which freed his hands, which read to me, perhaps wrongly, but I was not wrong, as a conscious effort to appear non-threatening. He said, "What did you say? Not are you talking to me? Not what are you? Not the price assessment question I had heard 100 times from 100 beings on a dozen stations in 2 years. Just, what did you say?" I said it again. "Save me. Take me with you." He looked at me. He looked past me at the stall, at the inventory tags and the trader Suvith Auric, behind his folding table, already watching us from the corner of his narrow eye. Then he looked back at me, and I watched him calculating something. It was not the calculation I was used to seeing in beings who studied me. It was slower than that. More deliberate. He said, "What's your name?" I had not been asked that in 8 months. The questions landed with a physical weight, the way something does when you have forgotten that it has mass. My name was not on the inventory tag. My name was not in Suvith Auric's manifest. My name was in the transit paper chain that moved with me. Deep in the paperwork where only legal officers bothered to look, and no one on Durrith Station had bothered to look since I had arrived 11 days ago, I said, Ariel Vorsen. He said it back to me, Ariel. He said it. They say you say a word you are setting into memory. Not performing for anyone but wanting it to sit correctly. The Vithali tonal mark on the first syllable came out flat, which was the human way, But he did not elide the second syllable the way most speakers did, and he put the compound mark on Vorsen where it belonged. Not perfectly, with effort, as if it mattered to get it right. Ariel Vorsen, he said. My name is Marin Golt. I run freight coordination out of this port. He said it like an introduction, like we were meeting. I did not know what to do with that, so I said nothing. He said, how long have you been in Oryx inventory? 11 days on Dureth. Before 14 days at Vethali Waypoint 7. Before that, 6 weeks on the hauler Sovan Keth. I stopped. Before that I was home. Something moved through his expression. Pity. I had seen pity, and it looked like a door being carefully closed. A person retreating from the reality of you. This was different. It was the look of a man who has just been told the dimensions of something, and is sitting with them, letting them be what they are. He said, the scar on your arm, from the transit chain? From a weld burn, I said. When I was 12, the chain is newer. He nodded slowly. He looked again at Sasuvith Orek, who was still watching us and had not moved to interfere because I was not technically doing anything prohibited by the station's market ordinances. I had not left the transaction boundary, and the Dureth market ordinances allowed verbal address from inventory to potential buyers, which was a law so degrading to contemplate that I had refused to contemplate it and had simply used it. Then Marin Golt looked back at me and said, tell me something. The transit paper chain you came in on, does it carry a valid Galactic Labor Compact designation? Has it been recoded to cargo classification? I felt something that I recognized, eventually, as hope, though, at the time I identified it only as an acute nausea and a sudden very clear vision of all the ways this man could disappoint me in the next few minutes, I said. It was recoded at Vethali Waypoint 7. The original classification was voluntary transit, dependent escort. Recode made it contracted cargo class 4. By whom? By the transit agent who took my bond paper from my escort after my escort defaulted on his travel debt. I do not know the agent's full name. He operated under the designation Tessavar Bonding House, Regional. Marin Galt blew a slow breath through his nose. He looked at his survey tablet, and I watched him pull it from under his arm and scroll through something. And I looked at his face while he did it, because his face was more informative than whatever was on the screen. He was finding something. He knew what he was looking for. He said, Class 4 contracted cargo recoded from voluntary transit. Dependent escort is a legal gray zone under Galactic Compact Article 17, subsection 4C, which means the recode is challengeable if the original escort's default is demonstrable. He looked up. Do you have the original bond paper, or a copy? It is in the transit chain. It was not removed because the bonding house agent did not want to create a discrepancy in the file weight. If you strip a document from a transit chain, the audit flags it, so the original is still there, underneath the recode. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then, so quietly that Suvith Orek, who was now openly watching from 6 meters away, could not possibly hear it, he said, I'm going to go and talk to your current holder. You should stand exactly where you are and look uninteresting. I said, I am very good at that. He almost smiled. It was not a full smile. It was the small sudden expression of a man who was not expecting to find something funny, and then did. He was already moving toward the stall table before it finished crossing his face. I stood exactly where I was and looked uninteresting. I listened, because the wind off the docking apron was at my back and it pushed sound toward me. I listened to Marin Galt introduce himself to Suvith Orek. Not the way a buyer introduces himself, with the careful deference that signals interest in the price, but the way a port coordinator introduces himself, with the flat, professional courtesy of a man who is here on business of his own, that has nothing to do with what the other man wants. He said he was auditing transit chains for a routine compact compliance check. He said he had flagged an anomaly in a Class 4 recode that had arrived 11 days ago, and he would need to examine the original chain documentation. He said it so matter-of-factly, so completely without the particular energy of a man lying, that I felt something in my chest go very still. Suvith Orek said he was in the middle of a transaction. Marin Golt said, this won't take long. The compliance check is mandatory, and the flag was raised automatically by the port registry system, so I'm not going to be able to leave without looking at the chain. You understand how it is. He said it the way you say a thing that is true enough, in the parts that matter, that the person you are saying it to cannot tell where the exact truth ends and the exact latitude begins. Suvith Auric understood how it was. Men like Suvith Auric always understood how it was when the alternative was having a port coordinator spend the afternoon examining their entire inventory manifest, which was not a thing that would go well for anyone operating in Durith Station's gray economy. The negotiation took 19 minutes. I know because I was watching the timer on the stall's public rate display, and I counted the minutes, because it was something to do that was not trembling. I did not tremble. I want to be clear about that. I had not trembled in Vethali Waypoint 7 either, or on the Sovinketh, or in any of the places I had passed through in 2 years and 4 months. I had cried exactly once, on the first night, in a dark corner of the Waypoint holding bay. After that I had decided that crying was a resource I could not afford to spend freely, and I had not spent it since. What I had done instead was learn everything that could be learned. The laws, the compact subsections, the fee schedules, and the audit procedures. Particular ways that a being who holds transit papers can be held accountable to things they would prefer to ignore if someone with the right knowledge and the right standing invokes those things at the right moment. I had learned all of that, but I had not found, until that afternoon, the someone with the right knowledge and the right standing to invoke it. I had needed a human for that. Humans had written the laws, and Marin Golt had read them. He came back across the market floor, holding a transit chip in one hand and my full paper chain in the other. He held the paper chain the way you hold evidence, carefully, with 2 hands when he transferred it to me, watching my face as I took it. I looked at it. I had not held my own transit papers since the bonding house agent at Vethali Waypoint 7 had taken them from the folder where my escort had stored them. The paper was the same weight it had always been. Sounds like a small thing and is not a small thing at all, I said. How? He said. Article 17, subsection 4C. Original escort's travel debt was settled at Waypoint 7. The bonding house filed a resolution notice, which is standard, and the resolution notice is in the public compact registry because it has to be. Which means the default was demonstrable. Which means the recode was challengeable. Which means that under the terms of the Galactic Labor Compact, Class 4 contracted cargo recoded from a dissolved voluntary transit designation is eligible for reclassification as a free transit traveler upon the holder's voluntary release, which Suvith Auric has just signed. He paused. He was very unhappy about it. I imagine, I said. He may file a counterclaim with the Regional Compact Office. Will it succeed? No. The default resolution in the registry is a primary document. Counterclaim would take 14 months to process and he would lose. He looked at me steadily. You know this already. I knew the law, I said. I did not have the standing to invoke it. He was quiet for a moment. The market moved around us. The dust and the noise and the smell of fuel from the docking aprons and the low thrum of a hauler somewhere overhead beginning its descent. He was looking at me the way he had looked at me the first time when I had said the words to his back, and he had turned around. That steady attention, he said. Where do you need to go? I had not thought past this moment. I had thought about this moment for 11 days. I had not thought past it because thinking past a thing you are not sure you will reach is a dangerous way to spend yourself. Dureth stayed in Narchin's marked floor with my transit papers in my hands, and I realized that I did not have an answer. He saw that. He did not look away from it or soften it. He simply waited, I said eventually. The nearest Vethali consular office is at Heron Station, 2 days on the standard freight route. I have a run to Heron Station, he said. I leave in 6 hours. I looked at him. You are offering me passage. I'm offering you the crew manifest, he said, which is different from passage. Passenger status requires a filed agreement with the Port Authority and 72 hours of processing time. Crew manifest is 40 minutes. I need a second pair of hands in the freight registry for the Heron run anyway. It's not difficult work. It's a lot of catalog entry and manifest reconciliation. He paused. You can do that kind of work? I can do almost any work, I said. All right. He shifted the survey tablet back under his arm. Come on then. He started walking toward the docking apron, stood still for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds in which I understood that I was about to follow a human man I had met 12 words ago across a frontier waste station to a freight hauler I had never seen, and that this was either the most dangerous thing I had done in 2 years or the first safe thing. Then I followed him. The docking apron was hotter than the market, the heat rising off the plasticrete and meeting the sun. Galt walked at a pace that did not consider itself too important to be matched. He did not glance back to check that I was keeping up. He simply walked, and I walked beside him. At the freight lift he said, "The hauler is the Dareth crossing. She's not pretty, but she doesn't leak and the life support has never given me trouble." "Those are the correct things to care about," I said. He pressed the lift panel. In the small metal box together, I was aware that I had not been in a small space with a being who was not Suvith Oryx, kind of being in 8 months, and I felt my shoulders pull slightly inward. He said, "You're safe. I want to say that clearly, in case it's useful to hear." I said, "How do you know to say that?" "Because you've been in the system for 2 years and I've been at Dareth Station 3. I've seen how people carry themselves when they've been in the system." He was looking at the lift doors. "If there are things that would make the next few hours easier, I want to know what they are," I said. "Would like to see the crew manifest before I sign it, and access to the compact registry to verify my papers." "Both straightforward," he said. "I'll pull up registry access as soon as we're on board." The Dareth crossing was in Bay 11, a mid-capacity freight hauler with the battered ticality of a ship maintained by the same hands for a long time. Every surface was clean. The landing struts looked newer than the hull, which meant he had replaced them when they needed replacing. He showed me the manifest on the port terminal, inside the aft cargo lock. He stood at a distance while I read it. Then he signed the crew entry slot and keyed my transit paper number into the reference field, and I watched the port registry accept it and generate a confirmation number. He said nothing. He simply held the screen at an angle I could see comfortably and waited. I said, "It is accepted." "It is," he said. I logged into the compact registry and pulled my own file, and read that my transit status had been updated to free transit. Crew designation, the highest protection category available to a being without formal planetary representation, requiring my consent and a 72-hour review period, and a senior compact officer's agreement before any recode could be applied. Stood at the terminal for a long moment. Marin Galt was looking at the equipment rack. He had not turned around. I said, "Galt." He turned around. I said, "Thank you." He looked at me for a moment with that steady attention. Then he said, simply, "You're welcome." He meant it without ceremony. Without the weight people put on courtesies when they want you to know how much you owe them. He said it the way you say it when a thank you is offered and you receive it, and the account is settled, and the next thing can begin. I did not say anything else. "I did not trust my voice entirely," he said. "Departure is in 5 hours and 40 minutes. There's a bunk in the forward crew compartment. Second on the left is vacant. If you need to sleep before we go, sleep. If you're hungry, there's a provision cabinet in the galley. Key code is on the panel. Help yourself." Picked up his survey tablet from the equipment rack. "I'll be in the freight office doing the departure manifest. If you need anything." The intercom panel on the compartment wall connects directly to the office. He moved toward the inner hatch and stopped. He did not look back. He said, "Ariel, the consular office on Heron Station. Do you want me to help you make contact before we arrive?" I said, "Yes, please." He nodded once and went through the hatch. I stood in the cargo lock for a while. The hatch was open to the docking apron and the heat was coming in. And beyond it I could see the market awning and the crowd moving under it, and the sky above all of that. Dareth's pale orange, deepening toward the horizon where the dust thickened. I had not stood at an open hatch looking at open sky in 2 years and 4 months. I stood there until my eyes had absorbed it properly, until it had gone from an idea back into the actual thing, smelling of fuel and heat and the faint mineral bite of the desert. Then I went inside. The Dareth crossing departed at the 5th hour of the evening. I was in the forward crew compartment when we lifted. Sitting on the edge of the bunk, I felt the ship take weight and the landing struts release, and then the steady push of ascent, and then the silence of the upper atmosphere beginning. Through the porthole, the orange sky darkened to violet and then to flat black, and the stars came out one by one and then, all at once. I had seen space through portholes before, on the Soven Keth and the Holler before that. But I had seen it with someone else's papers attached to me. There is a difference that is difficult to explain, except to say that the stars look different when they are available to you and when they are not. When they are not, they are simply where you are being taken. When they are where you might go. The intercom on the wall panel clicked. Marin Golt's voice came through, the same measured cadence as before, particular inflection. He said, "We're clear of Dureth station traffic. 42 days to Harran. Smooth run if the weather holds in the Tessavar corridor. Are you all right?" I held the intercom button. I said, "Yes." "Good," he said. "Get some rest if you can. Registry work starts at the 6th hour tomorrow. I'll walk you through the system before you start," I said. Galt. A pause. "Yes?" I had not planned to say anything else. But there was something I had been thinking about since the market floor, since the moment he had said, "What did you say?" and then listened to the answer. And I wanted to say it because it was true and because I did not know yet whether I would find it easy to say true things. 2 years of saying only what was necessary. I said, "When you turned around, on the market floor, why did you?" The pause was longer this time, he said, "Because you used my name." I thought about this. "I didn't know your name then." "I know," he said. "You said save me." And somehow, it sounded like my name. Another pause. "I don't have a better answer than that." I held the intercom button for a moment, without pressing it. Then I pressed it, and said as a sufficient answer, he said, "Get some sleep. Ariel Vorsen." He said my name the same way he had said it the first time, like a word being set into memory, like it mattered to get it right. I released the intercom button. Outside the porthole the stars moved, or rather the ship moved, and the stars held still as they always do, patient and enormous, and entirely indifferent to the small vessels that pass through them. But there is a kindness in that too, if you want to find it. That they hold still, that they are where you left them, that the distance between one star and another is a thing you can measure and cross, one long, slow freight run at a time. I lay back on the bunk and looked at the porthole and breathed. 42 days to Harran Station. I counted the stars I could see from where I lay, which was 7, which was enough to start with. I had a name on the ship's manifest. I had a crew designation on the compact registry. I had my own transit papers in my own hand. And in the freight office, 3 bulkheads forward, a man named Marin Golt was doing departure calculations and had, approximately 43 minutes ago, changed the shape of my life with a transit chip and Article 17, subsection 4C, and a willingness to turn around when someone said the words to his back. He had asked my name. That was the first thing. Before the law, before the manifest, before any of it, he had asked my name. I have thought about that in the years since, about the order of it, how the name came first, how he said it back to me and set it into memory, and made it the foundation everything else was built on, so that when the legal mechanism clicked into place, it was not a stranger being reclassified, but a person he already knew. Ariel Vorsen, who needed 42 days and a crew berth and someone to walk her through the systems before she had to operate them alone. At Harran Station, the Vithali consular officer asked me how I had come to be on the Free Transit Registry rather than in a cargo chain heading for the dry planet interior. I told her about the market and the 14 words and the law and the man who knew where the exceptions lived. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was. I meant it. Marin Golt was waiting outside the liaison office when I came out. He had 2 cups of station coffee. He offered one without asking, which was the correct choice. We stood in the corridor, and he did not ask how the interview had gone, because he had enough respect for what it had been to let me tell him what I wanted and leave the rest. I told him the forms were filed and the waiting period was 30 days, and that the officer had been kind. He nodded. Then he said carefully, "I have a return run to Durath in 11 days. If the consular process takes 30 days, I'll come back through, and I'll need the same work done on the freight registry." I said, "Is there actual, or are you providing me with a crew designation so I have somewhere legitimate to be for the next 6 weeks?" He looked at the corridor wall. He said, "Is some work." I looked at him for a moment. The weathered jaw, the copper eyes that did not price things, or add them up but simply looked. I said. All right, he said. Good. Outside the Heron Station concourse, the freight docks cycled their haulers in and out, and above them the observation ports showed the stars, holding still, patient, enormous, the same stars they had always been. That, in the end, was what I had asked for. Not rescue. I had known the law. I had been waiting for someone with the standing to invoke it. What I had asked for was for someone to turn around. He had turned around. We went to find the freight registry and started on the backlog. There was, turned out, quite a lot of work.